Hello, everyone, and welcome to Top Reasons Why Legacy Data Protection Fails and What to Do About It. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. And speaking of Actual Tech Media, I am Keith Ward with Actual Tech Media, that very company, and I am thrilled to be your moderator for this special event today. At the top, though, I need to cover some housekeeping items for you. First of all, we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. That's also the place to let us know where you're logging in from today. In fact, you are logging in from DC. That would be Larry, just a little ways away from me. Morteza, good morning. Tomo and Gilbert from South Carolina, and someone from North Carolina, from Jom and Amen. Stephen, thank you all so much for being here with us today. It is great to have you. Now, everyone else who's on, let us know where you're coming from. We love to hear from you and see whereabouts y'all are located. So that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is your first go-to option. If you can't hear something or see something, if the slides aren't working properly, you may need to give it a couple of refreshes. If the first one doesn't work, if that still doesn't take care of the problem, let us know in the Q&A. We'll hop on and help you out. Now, right next to that Q&A tab is the handouts tab with lots of crucial information, including 3 outstanding handouts from Rubrik. And they are, let's see, showing you the ways, a guide to show you the ways to reduce the risk of data theft. Another guide to show you how to protect data against the bad guys. And there's also a zero trust data security guide. Wow, so much goodness. That stuff is all free and it's in the handout section. So make sure you head over there and take a look. There you'll also find a link to the ATM Decisions Group, which is a panel of IT decision makers like you that participate in more in-depth events and other opportunities. You can sign up there to join if you would like. You'll also find a link to our events center, which has our calendar of upcoming events in the days to come. Check that out, see what you like, and sign up after the event today. And finally, at the end of the webinar, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you. Now, you have to be in attendance during the whole event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of the drawing can be found in that same handout section. Just scroll to the bottom, and all the info is right there. And with that, why don't we get to the main event here? It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. He is Joshua Stenhouse. He's been with us before and is always entertaining. So I'm going to hand this over to him right now. Joshua, you have the floor.
Welcome to the webinar, Top Reasons Why Legacy Backup Fails. My name is Hannah and I work on the programs team here at Rubrik. Our speaker is none other than Joshua Stenhouse. Joshua is the CTO of Cyber Resilience here at Rubrik and is thoroughly experienced executive in the cyber resilience and cybersecurity industry. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing and hand it over to you, Josh, to kick us off here.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to talk to you about the real problems that we're seeing when it comes to legacy backup in today's modern world of data everywhere and multiple different solutions, but also the biggest threat and change in the backup market, which is now we know that cyber attackers are coming for your backups to remove your ability to recover. And so I'm going to touch on all of the problems in the current landscape, but my job is cyber resilience. My job is to make sure our customers are able to actually recover in a timely manner. All of my experience comes from over 170 plus recoveries from major attack that we've assisted with. These are the lessons that I have learned, and I'm going to give to you all in this session and explain how Rubrik helps and then give you a summary of the resources. But let's start off by saying the obvious. Everybody has got backup. You would not be on this call if you didn't have backup. And if you don't have backup, you've most definitely got a problem in that if you don't have a backup, then you have 100% got nothing to recover in the event of a cyber attack. And you're probably not going to be able to get out of having to pay the ransom. But the next problem that everyone has, and I'm sure you could do your own tally across your environment right now, is that between cloud, all your on-premises workloads and SaaS, I'm willing to bet that an immediate problem you have is that you have at least one, if not two, maybe three plus different backup solutions and technologies. And the easiest example here is in a data center, for database backups, you might have DBAs running their own backups. You can't actually recover a database yourself as a practitioner. The DBA has to recover it. And that's immediately a problem in recovery from an attack, because now you've got to get the whole house in order to just recover simple services and databases. But furthermore, you might have cloud teams managing their own backups. SaaS might not even have a backup at all, which is a problem in a shared responsibility model, because you call the SaaS provider and say, hey, my data's gone, and they'll say, I hope you had a backup. And then on premises, you might have a multitude of different solutions across databases, hypervisors, and NAS. And so the distinct problem here is that a modern backup admin might only control 20 or 30% of the backups of your environment. And by virtue of all these different technologies coming over the last few years, you might not even realize until you sit down right now and do a tally of all the different solutions you're using and which ones are even in your purview or not. You're going to have and realize that you've got a problem, and then you've got too many point solutions, and half of them are so far out of your control that you don't even know whether you have a backup or not. So back to the previous slide, it might seem obvious in saying, well, 99% of organizations have a backup, but if you don't know whether you have a backup or not, because somebody else is managing it, guess what? You might not. And so this is a problem all organizations are facing, in that you've got multiple point solutions and you don't even have a single source of truth to tell you whether you even have a backup for that resource or not. But the next thing is, we know backups are at risk. And 70% of organizations, and I see it all the time, still do not have immutable backups. And if you don't have immutable backups, then all I can tell you is attackers do not wait for budget cycles. They will come in, they know to delete your backups to guarantee or do their best to ensure they get the ransomware payment. And so they will come for them. And you can't sit on your hands and say, well, maybe next year. You need to go back to your business and say, we do not have immutable backups. If we get attacked, I am telling you in writing right now that we will have nothing to recover, and you will ask to recover from backup and nothing will be there. Because we know 70% of organizations do not have immutable backups, and 74% of attacks are at least partially successful in removing the backups and removing your ability to recover. And specifically what I want you to think about is, don't just ask if they're immutable. I want you to consider what would happen if the attacker was to get access to your backup admin account. Because there's a tendency for people to think that they're immutable, but if you say it's immutable yet you can edit the data in that backup, then that's not an immutable backup. So you can't just take any vendor's word for it. You have to test this, and you have to prove that even a backup admin cannot edit or expire the backups by any different mean possible. And we'll go into it and talk about the different ways to test that out. But the fact of the matter is that we know that the gangs and attackers will get your backup admin account. They can very easily compromise and bypass MFA by social engineering alone. And if they get that account, if that account can delete and expire it, that's exactly what the attacker can do. If they can do that, test it, document it, and send it within your organization, and make sure that you're minimizing your own risk and saying that, hey, my account might be compromised, and delete it. It's not my fault because the attacker has bypassed our MFA, for example. So you have to start thinking about the attacker getting your account. What can your account do? If in any way it can edit data in a backup, it can compromise it. If it can expire it, that's what they'll do. It doesn't matter whether it's an immutable file system or not. You've got to look at the actual backup and what can and can't be done. But then the next problem you've got, especially in the event of an attack, is let's say your entire environment is encrypted. Then immediately the business has to answer this question in the world of data exfiltration. Well, what's in that encrypted data? Because you have to presume that anything that was encrypted most likely was then exfiltrated. So now you have a key problem of, well, what was in it? And every organization that I speak to typically has this problem, whereby you have no visibility into what is inside the data. And you might not even know what data you even have because of all those different tools that we mentioned and you're going to do a tally on. And then this problem isn't getting easier. Nobody is saying, oh, I've got less backups and less storage to manage. It's increasing. Storage is always going to grow. 66% of leaders surveyed said storage is growing. It's always going to grow. And if you have these multiple tools and all these problems today, then it's just going to continue to get worse over time. And the real humdinger of them all and the wake-up call I want to give you all, and if you take away one thing from this session, this is it, is that the other big problem legacy backup has is that it likely won't even survive the most common attack inside a data center on premises. Because I've got news for you all. And you can see it in the news. You can go and Google it and double check this. You can go and take this from our Zero Labs report that we've given in the handout. But the news flash for you all is that if you're looking for a file-based encryption attack, you're looking for the wrong thing. Only 17% of attacks reported to our ransomware response team in the last year were the traditional file level attack. And this is, in my experience, 170 plus responses. I will tell you, I would wish for such a scenario if I'm managing a backup environment, because I know that, okay, I've got some encrypted files and some desktops, I've got a ransom note, but I've got a pretty good chance of recovering that data. And you could also argue that if you have sufficient endpoint protection, that it's going to stop this attack. But the reality you're going to face in the data center is very different, because 83% of attacks now encrypt from the hypervisor. This is from the hypervisor host level. And this therefore bypasses all endpoint protection. So any of you out there saying, hey, our security software is going to protect us. The evidence here is that, well, if all you needed was security software, then ransomware wouldn't exist as an industry because everyone has endpoint protection. And the truth is, attackers are bypassing it. Now, this is a very specific problem to the data center. In the cloud, there are different risks and issues, which I'll talk about. But in the data center, because you can access the hypervisor, the attacker can access it. And for the majority of hypervisors, there's no ability to install endpoint protection in the hypervisor host itself, only on the operating system. And that's why the attackers do it. They bypass it. So now you're faced with this absolute Armageddon scenario, because everything running in a VM is now offline. Its disks are encrypted. You can't access it. So what you need to ask yourself is my legacy backup solution running in the very thing that it is trying to protect? Because if it is not going to, and it likely won't survive the most common attack. So I encourage you all in your next tabletop exercise to put this at the top of your list. And if you're doing a ransomware tabletop exercise, what I want you to do is be that person in the room that puts the hand up and says, in every single proposed step of the recovery, is that reliant on a virtual machine? Because if it is, take that off. You can't, that's not an option. Or we have to consider how long would it take to rebuild that first. You have to factor that in. If it takes you 2 days to recover your ability to even recover, that should be in your tabletop exercise to then prove a real world cyber RTO. So you have to make sure that you're considering that if every VM is encrypted, how does this impact your ability to recover from backup? And this is a problem with legacy backup in that the solutions weren't created with this in mind. So they're not able to even survive it, to layer on any sort of tooling that it might say they have in helping you detect. Because if you're running in a VM, you yourself won't survive the attack to detect anything. So it is a fundamental problem with this legacy approach, in addition to everything else that I've said, because if we summarize it, you got multiple point solutions, you got backups that are at risk because they're either not immutable or can still be edited or expired. You got no visibility into what is even being backed up, which is definitely a problem in response to an attack and understanding what is on the network. The data is growing, and the problem's only getting bigger. And then to top it all off, it might not even survive the attack in the first place. So this is why legacy fails. And this is why Rubrik is the best solution positioned to help you here. And yes, I've worked at Rubrik 7.5 years of my life. Before that, I used to work 5 years at Zerto. Before that, I was an end user and a backup admin myself. And everything that I'm going to tell you from here on is not because I work for Rubrik. It's because this is in the best interests of your job, your company, and your ability to recover from an attack, in making sure that you have the right tools and technology in place to mitigate all of the problems that I'm saying here. Because it is in your best interest to listen to everything else that I'm about to tell you and how Rubrik is going to help you. So we're going to start with on-premises, because that has its own challenges, and then we'll zoom out and we'll start looking at the cloud. So the first thing, on-premises. If you go back to when I first started at Rubrik 7.5, 8 years ago, then there was a bit of a joke of, hey, you're using physical appliances. And isn't that a bit backwards? Shouldn't you be completely software-based in a data center? And what we're seeing is that actually now that if you go and speak to an analyst, they'll say, oh, it's a choice. You know, you can choose a software approach or a converged appliance approach. And I'd argue, I don't think there is a choice. Because if you have a data center, the only way that you can guarantee that your ability to back up and recover is not being impacted by that hypervisor-based attack is a converged physical appliance approach. You have to converge the backup software and the storage and layer in all the security controls of a vault in order to guarantee your business's ability to take a backup and then survive that attack. So when we put physical appliances in your data center at Rubrik, we call it a Rubrik Secure Vault, because it is replacing backup software, backup storage, and the need for a separate vault, all in a single solution that is not running in the hypervisor. It's running in its own physical stack. So every single VM, every single physical server can be compromised, and yet Rubrik is sat there in its own silo, and it's able to recover. And all your different workloads, VMware, AHV, Hyper-V, Azure HCI, Linux, AIX, HPUX, Solaris, Oracle, Exadata, your DAGs, DB2, your Active Directory, anything via NFS or SMB database dump, this Rubrik Secure Vault can capture and then store in its hardened Linux system. And a key element here is that I use Windows. I'm a massive Surface fan. I would refuse to work if I couldn't use my Surface. And Windows is great as an end user. But in my professional opinion, there's no way anyone can rely on a Windows system as the last line of defense of your business. Why? Because I can tell you, Windows is compromised in pretty much every attack that I've been responding to. And so the only way you can guarantee survivability, or the best chance of survivability of a server on a network, is to make sure that it is hardened Linux, make sure that it is upgrade, and you're minimizing the attack surface. Because even if you're running secure Linux, if it takes 6 months to upgrade, guess what? That's 6 months where you're always going to be out of date and therefore at risk. So one big thing we focus on at Rubrik is making sure that you can point, click, go from a centralized control plane, click upgrade, everything is online on the latest version within an hour, no disruption to any backup operation. That is where legacy backup traditionally fails, and that it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, and that by the time you finish an update, you have to update it again. That's all risk, that's all headache that you have to manage, make your life easier, make it no downtime, centralized upgrade. We also are still a software company though. So yes, you can have Rubrik branded appliances that is all super micro, but we also support every major hardware vendor out there. You can do hybrid of spinning and flash, or all flash, completely up to you. You can go Dell, HPE, Cisco, you name it. And the key thing is that this is a breathing, living cluster where it scales out. So you can put in one appliance with 150 terabytes usable in a 2U, all the way up to, you do 10 of them, and now in 20 U's of rack space, you have 1.5 petabytes of usable capacity. So this has got legs, this scales, and it's also likely going to significantly reduce your footprint versus your existing backup technologies plus a vault, because everything is built in to this Rubrik Secure Vault concept, and everything is deduped, compressed. You're typically going to see a 55:1, so There's nothing new under the sun with dedupe. Whatever you're getting today, Rubrik's going to be either the same or within 5%, depending on the cleanable space. Everything is encrypted end to end, and everything is erasure coded. And so this means no legacy RAID. This is built in. You don't get a choice here. These are just table stakes. Because if you're not efficient on the storage, it's not going to be cost efficient to replace it with Rubrik. It is. It's built in, table stakes. But the next thing that is massively important, there's no way anybody in 2024 should be running a backup platform that is not natively immutable. As I've said, the attackers will come, they will edit, they will encrypt, and they will remove your backups. With Rubrik, every single backup is immutable on the first copy. You don't have to send it anywhere else to make it immutable. Cannot be modified or encrypted. It's our own proprietary append-only file system. So basically a fork on Google Colossus, so same file system as YouTube. And all it means is that nothing can be edited or encrypted once it's ingested into the Rubrik Secure Vault. But I'm also going to throw a new term here. You also have to make sure it's indelible. Indelible, so immutable can't be modified. Indelible can't be expired. And so we don't just make sure it's an immutable file system. We also make sure that you can put on a non-modifiable retention lock, whereby for your critical workloads, we're making sure that you can make it so even you cannot drop the retention and expire the backups. We also have two-person rules, retention locks, where for workloads that aren't that important, where you want that extra level of security, but for critical workloads, non-modifiable retention lock, and that is your ultimate failsafe. Because if your account can't drop the retention, or two accounts can't drop the retention if an attacker compromises two accounts in your org, which they will, then not even the attacker can expire your backups. And we also make sure that the attacker can't simply just poison NTP and expire the backups by jumping the clock. Because a lot of backup systems will say, hey, it's immutable. But if you jump the clock to 2050, and it's a great red team test, you'll see that all the backups are expired because it thinks it's 2050. So the beauty of the monotonic clock in the Rubrik Secure Vault is that it's not actually using NTP for backup expiration. Why? Because you can't trust the time. So monotonic clock is simply measuring the passage of time. And so it's basically counting the milliseconds. And so it understands that, hey, even if you jump NTP, yes, you can use secure NTP, but even if that's jumped, it's not enough seconds passed to actually be that time, and therefore doesn't impact the backup expiration. And this is all validated, SEC and FINRA compliant. So this is like having the security of a tape-based worm backup, but the speed of recovery from disk on the network. But you also have to make sure that you're protecting it from the attacker accessing the backups themselves. So built into every Rubrik Secure Vault is a logical air gap. Now, air gapping is a controversial term. I mean, you could also be funny about air gaps and say, well, if you're on a wireless network, that's an air gap. But the real truth is that there are two types of air gap. There's a logical air gap and a physical air gap. And so there are many different ways of achieving it. We have physical air gap solutions where you can put another Rubrik Secure Vault behind a firewall. We typically see that in the large banks where they want to spend the money. But the majority of customers say, I just want to protect the first copy. I don't want a second or third copy just to protect my backup data, because that is expensive, it's complex. I want to protect the first copy. So the first copy is protected in Rubrik because it's immutable, it's indelible, and it's logically air-gapped on the network. And what I mean by that is that the attacker can't access the operating system. There is no root user. There is absolutely no root on a Rubrik Secure Vault, because it wouldn't be secure if it had a root account that you had to secure. Because guess what? If you have to secure the root account, that's what the attacker will go for, and they will compromise the system. And then furthermore, the actual backup storage itself, when Rubrik is writing to Rubrik, is not stored on any accessible protocol. There's no NFS, there's no SMB. Yes, we can ingest those, but no, the data itself is not stored on it. So this is like a triple punch to the attacker on your network. There's one, they can't edit or encrypt the backup. Two, they can't expire it. And three, they can't even access it. They can't access the underlying backup storage. Yes, they can access the backup interface, but even if they log in as you, because of the immutability and indelibility, they can't do anything anyway. So the sad news I have for you all is that they're still unfortunately going to attack you and take a swing and see if you want to pay just based on maybe it's within your insurance premium, which they probably pilfered and figured out. But all it means is that they're not going to remove your ability to recover, which is the most important thing in any backup platform in 2024. But let's say you do want a physical air gap. As I said, you can put in another Rubrik Secure Vault behind the firewall for either all your data or a subset if you want to buy 2x. You want to spend more, you can do it. But you don't need it to protect the backups, and you don't need it for a physical air gap, because the most cost-effective way to get a physical air gap for anything protected on premises is cloud. So you can take a Rubrik Secure Vault, attach it to a Rubrik Cloud Vault, and that is then a physically air-gapped copy of the data archived offsite to cloud. It's only accessible from the data vault itself, and then we're actually turning on immutability and retention lock controls via a separate storage provider in the cloud under the covers. This is all, for complete transparency, basically Azure Blob as a service. If you want to use your own Azure Blob storage and make it immutable, you can. But the reason I recommend it and provided by Rubrik is because then it is outside of your control. It is not part of your Active Directory Enter ID, and therefore the attacker has no ability to even access that account. And this is the most cost-effective way to get a fast local recovery from a logical air gap, and then an offsite archived immutable copy in the cloud. And you might say, well, why can't I just use the cloud only immutable copy? And the answer is recovery time objective. Because if you have to download all your data from the cloud, take the amount of data, take the speed of your internet connection, that is now your recovery time objective. And I bet if you put that in the number of hours or days that would take, and take the cost of downtime of your business for just 24 hours, and then multiply the figure, I bet you will prove a need and also be able to go and get a budget as to why you need this technology in that single metric alone. But then we still have to protect the logins. So you have the ability to configure role-based access control, least privilege access. You have mandatory MFA, single sign-on, so anything SAML 2.0 compliant. But we also have to presume that your directory service has not survived the attack in of itself. Active Directory is usually compromised. So we also make sure that every Rubrik Secure Vault has a local break glass user. So you think of it like smashing the glass in the data center and pull out, and in my opinion, you could actually print off the QR code for the built-in MFA, put it in a data center, and that would be more secure than putting it in a digital vault. Why? Because we know attackers love to go for digital password vaults. Print it off. And it's an important element that the local break glass user is not just a username and password. This also has to be protected. And it has a built-in MFA mechanism by a TOTP. So literally just scanning a QR code or printing it off and putting it in the data center. And this is what allows you to then log in, even if everything else is down, and recover your Active Directory, your physical, your virtual, etc. But then the next thing is we have built-in scanners, where we're scanning all of the data proactively on your behalf, because a key problem here is speed. And if you can't scan the backups fast enough, then invariably what you're going to have to do is recover everything in waves. And what I see in legacy backup is everybody is bolting on their cyber scanners, and it's either third-party software or it's externally provisioned software. And as soon as you do that, what that means is you have to mount the backup and then you have to walk the file system. And then you have a problem, well, how long is that going to take? And the answer is it's going to be so long that you're going to be down for weeks just trying to find a clean recovery point. And you can do some very simple math, and you can say, okay, let's say I've got 1,000 backups and I keep those 1,000 servers that I'm backing up, and I keep 30 days of daily backups for my 1,000 servers. Well, how many backups are you going to have to scan in an attack to understand what is clean? The answer is 30,000. So what I'd encourage you all to do is next time you speak to your existing backup provider, get your own number based on your environment and say, if I had to scan these to find a clean backup, how long would it take? And that answer is now going to be an accurate reflection on your true recovery time objective from a cyber attack, and it is likely going to shock you and be a valuable tool for you to then go and advocate for change. Because the secret sauce of Rubrik is that We're scanning every backup continuously. We're looking for known IOCs, but we're also indexing every single hash. So we know every hash of every file from every backup at every point in time, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256. So in the event of an attack, an incident responder can come in and say, hey, these are the 100 hashes that we're looking for. You can scan 50,000 backups in maybe 40, 50 seconds flat. Ask your existing provider this, you'd be lucky if you get a week. Probably more, you might not even get an answer. And if I was going to pick one of every single differentiator that Rubrik has on premises, this would be the number one, because it is a ridiculous amount faster. We're talking 2, 3, 4,000x faster, because it already has an index of every hash. It gives you the fastest cyber RTO. And this is the only way, when you put all of these together, that on premises, you're going to stand a chance of making a recoverable event in hours versus days in a major cyber attack. If anyone says they can recover from a cyber attack in 10 minutes, no way. You're talking about just recovery of backup. You're not talking about an actual cyber attack where in the fog of war, now you've got to understand what is or isn't clean. And it's not just whether it contains encrypted data, it's whether it also contains the attacker's tooling. And this together is the only way that you're going to stand a chance of recovering within that 24-hour period. But that's just on premises. That is only one area that we help our customers with. We also help customers with large unstructured data sources. This is your large NAS, multiple petabytes, unstructured, could also be image data if you're in the healthcare system. And when I say large, I mean 1 petabyte or above, where NDMP doesn't work, snapshot on an array is not a backup, you need a backup. Rubrik has some really cool technologies there, which will give you some links to go and find out more. But we also help customers protect SaaS. So M365, everything therein, Jira, Salesforce, we just GA'd actually this week. And then we also help customers who either lift and shift, have workloads in the cloud, or looking to do so, or maybe even born in the cloud. So everything from Kubernetes, S3, Blob, EC2, RDS, VM, SQL, Entra ID, everything that you're running in cloud, Rubrik can protect that too. And this is how we're going to help you consolidate this tooling. Because what we're saying is that this Rubrik Security Cloud platform is a modern SaaS-first immutable backup platform, where you get a centralized secure SaaS control plane, where you get immutable backups everywhere, but we also include elements of DSPM, where we're not just backing it up, we're also scanning it to tell you what's in it across on-premises, cloud, and SaaS. And what I can tell you is if you look at your existing legacy backup, it might be, once you get past the marketing, this is reality, you can go and test it and we'll show you the links to go and see this. Once you get past the marketing, count how many interfaces you have to use to try and do the same. It might not even be the same vendor. They might be reselling someone else's software. This is a centralized interface, one platform to rule them all. It is deployed one per customer. You plug in your single sign-on. You get centralized auditing, but very critical for you all, because I know it's SaaS, and there's a tendency when you come from a backup background to say, whoa, I am not putting my backup platform in the cloud. I am not leaving it to SaaS where anyone can log into it from anywhere. And the truth is here, you're not doing that, because you're getting the benefit of a centralized control plane, but you configure this IP allow listing here. And between the IP allow listing and the single sign-on, what we're saying is you get all the benefits of SaaS, but with no downside. Because if you're not on a trusted IP, you can't log into this. If you don't have your username, password, plus your single sign-on, your MFA, you're not getting into it. So between these two, this is how you get the benefit of a single pane of glass across everything, but you're not compromising your security. And it's not like putting your virtual infrastructure or your domain control on the internet. Quite the opposite. You're just saying, I have my own secure centralized interface, and the more data centers and the more data sources you have, the bigger the benefit you get from this, because it is only accessible from your IPs. But furthermore, you might also be saying, well, what if I don't want to put my data in the cloud? Well, you don't have to, because this is the control plane. Where the data lives is completely at your discretion. So you put in a Rubrik Secure Vault in a data center, you can put one in each data center, you can replicate between them. If you don't want your data to leave the data center, it never will. Plain and simple. You control the data sovereignty and locality, and this is why you get the best of both worlds, because you're separating the management from the data. This is the modern approach. This is the right way to do it, because nobody wants to put all the data in the cloud if you don't have the ability to do that, or even the legal remit within your organization. But nobody wants to manage an interface for every single data center or every single source. So this is the perfect solution that allows you to get the best of both worlds. And for anything where it's like multi-petabyte and structured, you can send that on premises, you can send it to cloud, we scan it, make it immutable. For M365, one thing that's really cool about Rubrik is we're not taking that on-prem cluster and now running it in the cloud to protect your SaaS, because that then creates scalability issues. We're actually using Azure Kubernetes under the hood, so it dynamically scales. So let's say in M365 you need to back up 100,000 users, recover 100,000, it automatically scales and gives you the performance you need. It's not legacy, it's not running a cluster when it doesn't need to. We only run the cluster on the physical hardware in the data center where you need it. And then for everything cloud, this is the right way to do it, where we're taking snapshots in the cloud account and then we're replicating them cross-region and cross-account. And that is the number one differentiator against any cloud native tool, where you can say, okay, yeah, my cloud team are managing their own backups. But you know what? Every cloud tool cannot do the number one thing that you need to do with a cloud backup, and that is get it outside of the account. It can go cross-region, but what if the account is compromised itself? And that is the number one attack vector in the cloud. It's not actually encrypting data. It's account compromise and then deleting and stealing the content. And so number one thing we do in cloud is protect it within the account, but we're able to replicate cross-region and cross-account so we can mitigate the risk of an account compromise. But then the other benefit this gives you from a backup perspective is you get the ability to do global policy-driven automation. So you can create your backup policies where you can say, take these number of backups, retain them for here, store them here, this is the window, and it will then automatically apply them across your entire estate. So I've seen organizations come from legacy backup with 500,000 backup jobs and literally come down to less than 100 Rubrik SLA domains, which is our policy-driven automation right here. So just think about that. If you could go from managing 500,000 backup jobs to just a handful of SLA domains, how much easier would your life be? Because the entire life cycle of the backup is managed automatically. It automatically can protect any new workload provisioned in a virtual machine on premises, in an EC2 instance, RDS, or a blob container in cloud, doesn't matter. It can protect it all. And what I can tell you is that a typical Rubrik customer sees a 90% management overhead reduction. It is huge. Because your life is easier if you can create one set of policies via the security cloud and apply them to all. But all I've spoken about so far is predominantly the underlying technology of the Rubrik Security Cloud, the secure vaults, making your backups immutable, etc. And what I can tell you is that from a licensing perspective, if you just need to get immutable backups, you need to consolidate multiple point solutions, and you want to just make your life easier and secure, then what I recommend is reach out, go to the website and say, hey, I want to look at Rubrik, and our Foundation Edition is going to give you exactly everything that I said. And Foundation Edition is the cheapest way to get on board and consume Rubrik. You can build a TCO against replacing all your existing tooling and say, hey, it's not going to cost us any more. And we're going to start with the Foundation Edition. And we just need to simplify life, consolidate the solutions, immutable indelible backups, and we're going to go Foundation Edition. But built in to all the Rubrik software, whether it's on premises or cloud, will also give the ability at any point to then upgrade to our Enterprise Edition, and then we're going to layer on everything else that we do in terms of speeding up your recovery from a cyber attack. So that is our encryption detection, where we're looking at not just the file encryption, If files are encrypted, we'll pick it up. We're actually the only solution in the world today that has a VM encryption detection machine learning model too. So it's not just the 17%, it is 100% of known attacks that Rubrik is going to detect. And we're not going to ask you for some arbitrary change rate per server, which nobody knows. The machine learning model from the second backup onwards, over 30 days, will automatically learn and detect that for you. But we're not just looking for the encryption attack, because that is the end of the kill chain. We're also scanning, and we can tell you what sensitive data was in those backups. So now as a backup team, you can do something you never thought possible before, where you can turn around to the organization, and when the organization is flapping saying we don't know what data was potentially exfiltrated, well, you can say, well, I know all the data that was on that network because we scanned inside the backups. Rubrik has 120 pre-built analyzers, so it knows what credit cards, social securities, etc. look like. But you can also give this out via self-service to governance, risk, and compliance and security teams, where they can put in their own custom regex and pattern analyzers and scan inside your structured and unstructured data, so inside the backups, and see across your entire estate every piece of sensitive information. Absolutely game changing. And it's kind of ridiculous if you think about it today, that if you're backing up petabytes of data, or terabytes, whatever your scale, if you can't even see what's in it, then how do you know what is on that network? And the number one time you're going to need to know that is response to an attack. And then we're not just allowing you to scan 50,000 backups in seconds for an indicator of compromise, a hash of a file. We're also continuously scanning every single backup based on Mandiant IOCs. So we announced this a couple of weeks ago. We were previously using our own intelligence feeds. We've now updated it. It's using Mandiant. So it's around 430,000 of the latest IOCs that are continuously updated and scanning every new backup coming in and every existing backup. You don't have to log in and click to do this, because that's a trick. Don't just ask if you're able to scan backups. You should ask who is scanning the backups, who manages it. Because guess what? If you have to log in and click, you're managing it. Not with Rubrik. It does it completely hands-free. Scans every backup on your behalf, and it also gives your security and incident response teams the ability to quarantine the backups. So when they pass it back to you, then you don't have to manually pick each backup. Then you can just point, click, go, and you can pre-build recovery plans for a disaster recovery, a production recovery in place, which is what we had a lot of customers use in the recent incident with the EDR software. I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about. And this was a big win for all of our joint customers, because they had a pre-built plan where they could just click go and recover the systems using the change blocks and get them back online and running. But you can also use this to pre-build your cyber recovery plans. And once you pre-built your recovery plan as saying, hey, these resources, this boot order, this IP, these scripts, we can then auto test it and connect them to isolated networks and allow you to prove your actual recovery time, that if you had to recover everything from your immutable backup platform, this is exactly how long it would take. And today, I'm sure you probably know that Rubrik is 5 years a leader in the Magic Quadrant in terms of vision. And all you're going to see is us continue to increase in the execution by just sheer virtue of building the right solution at the right time, and it being best placed to help you with the modern challenges of backup and ability to recover from cyber attack. We have over 6,100 customers, and that's only going to continue to increase. A externally validated high net promoter score, which might mean something to you, might not. But all I can tell you is that the majority of Rubrik customers love the experience and find it a positive change, especially switching to the single pane of glass. And that's the key difference here, is that it is a single data security platform. So that Rubrik Security Cloud, yes, you can leave it if you want to do a local recovery in a data center, but for 99.9% of your life and your day, you never have to leave that single pane of glass. And once you see it, and here's a screenshot on the right-hand side, you will think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I used to have to go to a different interface per site. I had to go to a different interface depending on which technology I was backing up. And if you think about your daily life in managing backup, being able to create the single set of SLA domains, one, we covered it, huge win. But think about reporting. I think there are whole solutions still out there today that are purely built to fix the problem with multiple backup interfaces and having to report across them. If you have one interface to rule them all, then every backup failure, every report, every event, every instant recovery, the live mount, is all managed from the central control plane. So this is why when I say 90% reduction admin overhead is typically what you see, this is where it comes from. Because you can create one report across every on-prem, cloud, or SaaS backup. Doesn't matter how many data centers you have. You can see every failure from this centralized interface. It's not a separate module. It's not a piece of software that you have to install inside a VM. That would be legacy, that would be ancient. It is all SaaS-based, but again, you're still controlling the data locality. So if you don't want the data, like for example, an Oracle database is a great example. Probably don't want that to leave a data center. It's not, but you still get the ability to control and manage the backups and view it all centrally. And also you could give out self-service to your DBA team and say, hey, DBA team, you now have a central interface for all your Oracle backups. And under the covers, it's actually just using RMAN. They can use their own script so it can automate it. But you can give them the ability to manage their own backups, only see Oracle databases. You can manage it too. So if you have a joint responsibility model, it's up to you. Or you could say, hey, you're going to do your own SQL and your own databases, but I'm going to manage VMware, etc. So you can still see their failures if they're not keeping pace and looking after their own work, and give them their own self-service, but all from a centralized control plane, centralized events, reportings. You can literally have it all. And so all you're going to see is 6,100 customers plus today. It's only going to increase because this is exactly how data protection should be in 2024. So we gave you the Rubrik Zero Labs handout. You can see it in the webinar format here. I recommend reading this if you want to understand more on the threat landscape and what is happening and what attackers are doing, because this is one of the key reasons why anyone switches to Rubrik today is, hey, I want to make my life easier. I want modern backup, but I've also got to make sure that I'm able to respond to an attack. And then the other thing I want to leave you with here is that everything I've talked about, you could say, oh, that's not real. I don't believe it. You can go and test it. And you don't have to test it in the legacy way of saying, oh, I'm going to do a whole POC and ship equipment or install something. You don't have to do it, because we're going to give you a link here and I'll just show it on the page here. But if you go to rubrik.com/explore and if I put that in the chat window, where's that gone? I don't have a chat, but we'll make sure we send it to you all anyway. But you can also just go and type it in your browser right now. But what you have the ability to do here is every single piece of technology that Rubrik has predominantly. So you want to see how Rubrik does Oracle, Rubrik does Azure VMs, Active Directory, DB2, Jira, Entra-ID, Mongo, how our AI solutions, SAP, keep going. You can see the list scrolling through here. You click one of these and say, okay, I want to see how Rubrik does Kubernetes. Unfortunately, yes, you're going to have to put an email in here, but that's fine. And once you get through to it, you get a guided product tour. So it's going to take you through every single step of the UI, and this is what the UI looks like. I can go to the inventory and I can see, okay, I've got Kubernetes protection. So you pick your poison, take your time, go and play with the UI and these walkthroughs, and you can get a feel for how Rubrik does everything via the Rubrik Security Cloud without having to, go through a load of pestering salespeople, etc. You can check it out yourself, make your own informed decision, and then reach out when you're in a comfortable position to say, hey, I tested it out. This is actually really cool, and I want to look at replacing this. As a general rule of thumb, that if your backup solution is and its licensing or storage or servers is expiring next week, probably a bit late. So start learning now, and next time will be a good opportunity. But usually you want to be planning 3 to 9 months in advance of your next licensing or renewal, or let's say you deduplicate storage is all going end of life in 9 months. Now is a great time to reach out, because one, you've got to get to grips with the product. It's got to be sized. You've got to, if you're doing data center, you've got to ship hardware and get it stood up. Yes, it's very simple, but it still takes time. If it's cloud, you can be way more agile because you can onboard like 100 AWS accounts in about 20 minutes flat. So on premises, 9 months in advance, you need to be planning your switch. Cloud, then you can literally switch everything in a week. But everything, whether it's on-prem or cloud, you can test out from the rubrik.com/explore and all of our story lane demos and see for yourself. You don't just have to take my word for it. So with that, thanks all.
And thank you, Josh. Wow, what a fantastic presentation. I loved it. So much detail there. So much knowledge and advice. Just great stuff. We also always love hearing what Rubrik is up to. Innovation always happening in the company, moving the field forward. So again, thank you for updating us on what Rubrik is doing. I'll just take issue with one thing you said here. Now, I get that you and lots of other folks like Surface laptops, and they're great machines. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Terrific machines. However, all of you who love Surfaces ahead of MacBooks are just wrong. It's just as simple as that. MacBooks are where it's at, people. Now, who is with me here that is listening today? Okay, maybe not many of you. I don't know. But I've used both plenty of times. I'm still a MacBook Apple fanboy in general and will always be one, I guess. But yeah, this is not to disparage Surface, just to say that MacBooks are better. I think that's clear. Anyway, enough of that silliness. There's one more thing left to do before we wrap up today. I need to award the $250 Amazon gift card. As I said at the beginning, like for this or any of our events, you have to be present for the entire webinar to be eligible to win. And the winner for today's event is Deborah Salek from Pennsylvania. Congratulations to you, Deborah. Sit tight. We're going to be in touch ASAP to get you your card. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. Thanks, Tom, for agreeing with me on the MacBook thing. You're obviously a wise man. So thanks to you attendees, to Tom especially, and to everyone else for being here for your great questions today. It's been so much fun for me, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. That is all for today, folks. Have a great rest of your day.